you won't be disappointed, because we're talking about a topic that we have in our everyday life, which is plastic. And plastic pollution is something we take very seriously at ChangeNOW. Because I guess you know, but we eat plastic, we breathe plastic, we have plastic in our blood, there is plastic in the glaciers, there is plastic everywhere. And so today we are having a very special moment here on this stage, because we are super happy to welcome here on the stage of ChangeNOW the launch, the unveiling of the very first ever plastic forecast. And so you will understand, because it can be a bit enigmatic like that, we have a video to show you the subject.
We have more than 8 billion tonnes of plastic on Earth. It's time we saw the weight of the problem. Introducing the Plastic Forecast, a daily weather report that measures the plastic raining down on us. The Plastic Forecast combines research measuring the plastic in our atmosphere with daily rainfall data to forecast the amount of plastic set to fall on us every single day. But it's more than a daily weather report. It's a daily reminder that plastic production is pushing our planet to breaking point and threatening the health of us and our children. It's harrowing, but there's hope. Unlike a regular forecast, this is one we can change.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's the end of a long day, but I hope it's been a great day here at the conference. I'm sure you all know that one of the greatest threats facing our planet is plastic pollution. And I represent Minderoo Foundation. My name's Tony Worby. I lead the environment portfolio at the foundation. And our mission is to solve intractable problems. Whether they be social or environmental issues, we are really focused on investing our resources and our time and energy and working with partners to deliver real change in the world. So we also pride ourselves on publishing This doesn't seem to be working. We really pride ourselves on publishing well-researched content, and I really recommend that you go and have a look at the Minderoo website, because one of the things that we do is to publish things like the Plastic Waste Makers Index, for example, or the Minderoo Monaco Commission on Plastics and Human Health, which is a report that we published just a little while ago. And those well-researched documents underpin the advocacy or the public engagement or the investments we make in alternatives, particularly when it comes to plastics. And that's just, you know, the way that we operate in the foundation. As I said, the current situation is grim, to say the least. We have vast amounts of plastic already on the planet, and more than 400 million tonnes of new plastic will be produced this year. And we know from our Plastic Waste Makers Index that that's growing by about 2 to 3% annually at the moment. Globally, we recycle only about 9% of that. Even here in Europe, where waste is typically managed very well, waste is collected and sorted, but most plastic is still incinerated. It's not recycled. And in many other parts of the world, it goes directly to landfill, or it ends up leaking into the environment because there is poor infrastructure, if any infrastructure, often to manage the waste. So on current projections, if we don't act, plastic production is set to triple by 2060. So it's fair to say our planet is at plastic capacity, and we really need to act now. There's actually so much plastic in the world now, over 8 billion tonnes of it, that it's in our weather. There's a growing body of peer-reviewed research, a selection of the papers are on the screen there, that quantify the amount of plastics that are in our atmosphere and that is falling down on us every single day. Not only when it rains, but even on remarkably clear days like today. Plastic particles are actually now so common in the atmosphere that they've been found in Antarctica, in fresh Antarctic snow, many thousands of kilometres from the other 6 inhabited countries from when that plastic was produced. So at Minderoo, we set about finding a new way to demonstrate the weight of this problem and highlight what we can do about it. So today, I'm really delighted to introduce you to the plastic forecast. There was a recent study in 2016 out of Paris by lead author Rashid Driss. And we take the analysis that he did on the amount of plastic pollution in the atmosphere, and we combined it with rainfall data from Météo France and calculated the number of kilograms of plastic set to fall on Paris, the greater Paris region, every single day. And it creates a new metric to the forecast, plastic. And we've timed the launch today to raise awareness among the public and with policymakers to get people to think differently about the plastic pollution issue. Because it's not only choking our rivers and our oceans, but it's actually very much in the air that we breathe. So our message is to help change this forecast by negotiating an ambitious and binding UN plastics treaty informed by the best available science. We know that we must drastically limit the production and consumption of new plastic and set effective and binding targets to reduce our global plastic footprint. So we plan to share this forecast, first with Paris, and then with other countries all around the world. And with this activation, we're looking to create a powerful symbol for the Global Plastics Treaty and to give something to coalesce around to limit fossil fuel production and consumption. So, without action, we know that rates of plastic pollution will only increase. And to present the very first plastics forecast, we have a special guest who people in Paris will recognise to present the first ever plastic forecast. So can you please warmly welcome the incredible Chloé Nabédian to have that honour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup d'être présent sur cet événement de ChangeNOW. Je suis enchantée d'être avec vous ce soir. Malheureusement, je suis sur cette scène pour vous annoncer une mauvaise nouvelle. Nous avons une alerte météo en cours. Figurez-vous qu'il y a du plastique actuellement qui tombe à Paris. Il devrait y avoir des pluies de plastique également demain et même après-demain et les jours suivants. Alors vous avez bien entendu, je parle de pluie de plastique, pas de grêle, pas de neige, pas de pluie classique. Figurez-vous que notre atmosphère, notre planète est tellement saturée en pollution plastique que maintenant elle est complètement intégrée dans notre pluie. Alors pour vous montrer un petit peu ce qui est en train de se passer, lorsque la pluie tombe, aujourd'hui le plastique tombe. Et pour bien le comprendre, il y a le site internet de Plastic Forecast qui a développé cette nouvelle mesure météo qui étudie la quantité de pollution plastique présente dans l'eau, dans cette pluie. Et vous allez le voir, puisque je vais vous présenter maintenant pour la première fois ces prévisions météo du plastique. On attend beaucoup de plastique cette semaine. Alors déjà, regardez. Aujourd'hui, les conditions sont quand même assez dégagées, claires. Vous allez avoir un temps particulièrement agréable. Il y aura malgré tout quelques averses de plastique tout au long de la journée. Vous allez recevoir à peu près 40 kg de plastique. Alors pourquoi vous avez quand même ces averses de plastique? Tout simplement parce que même s'il fait beau aujourd'hui, il y a encore de la vapeur d'eau dans l'atmosphère, et donc cette vapeur d'eau va capter ces particules de plastique et donc vont retomber sur nous ensuite. Alors pour la suite de la semaine, les conditions météo resteront identiques avec toujours un temps relativement calme. On attend par exemple jusqu'à 51 kg encore d'averses de plastique pour la semaine prochaine, pour lundi en particulier. Mais lorsqu'il pleut particulièrement beaucoup, il peut tomber jusqu'à 420 kg de plastique lors d'un orage par exemple. Et sur la totalité de la semaine, attendez-vous à avoir jusqu'à 354 kg de plastique. Alors sincèrement, je ne pensais pas qu'en 10 ans de carrière, j'allais présenter ce type de bulletin météo. C'est vraiment quelque chose qui inquiète, je le sais, mais sachez une chose, il y a de l'espoir. Parce que contrairement au bulletin météo classique, où on ne peut absolument pas changer la météo qu'il va faire, eh bien celle-ci, cette prévision du plastique, nous pouvons la changer. La semaine prochaine va se tenir un grand événement. Les délégués du monde entier vont se réunir pour négocier un traité très important contre la pollution plastique. Et c'est là où nous, on peut jouer. C'est notre chance. On a cette chance-là, une fois par génération, de pouvoir mettre fin à cette pollution plastique. Je vous invite donc à vous rendre sur le site internet de Plastic Forecast et de signer la lettre ouverte de la Fondation et d'être acteur de ce changement pour mettre fin à la pollution plastique. So now, it's your turn if you want. Tony, if you want to present the Plastic Forecast.
So you're a much more polished performer, I think, Chloe, than
Yes,
me, and
thank you.
I think your experience definitely shows through. But what we're really trying to show here, I think Chloe talked through the plastic forecast for today. Even though it's a fine sunny day outside, we're still getting about 40 kilos of plastic falling out of the atmosphere over the greater Paris region. Over the week, you can see, even though the weather forecast is actually quite good, we still expect to get 354 kilograms of plastic falling over greater Paris region. And if you extrapolate that out to what a month would look like, based on what we know of the seasonal rainfall patterns, but also what we know about the amount of plastic particles in the atmosphere, we get nearly 4,000 kilometers and over kilograms, excuse me, and over a full year, it comes to a fairly staggering amount, which is of the order of 47.7 tons. And I don't know about here in Paris, but in English we have a weird saying that, you know, when it rains very heavily, it rains cats and dogs. We kind of feel like it started to rain elephants in a sense, because what we've got is just this staggering amount of plastic that is raining down on us literally every single day. And the whole point of bringing this to you is to get people to think a little bit differently about the plastic pollution problem. We're used to seeing images of birds that have died because they've ingested plastic. We're used to seeing images of waterways being choked, but we don't often think about the plastic that's in our atmosphere and that we're breathing on a regular basis. So just to wrap up, over the next week, there'll be a lot of activations of the plastic forecast around Paris. The reason is because global leaders are meeting here next week to negotiate a global plastics treaty, and they need to hear from all of us about the importance of this issue, why we care so deeply about this issue, and to negotiate hard to ensure that we end up with a UN global plastics treaty that has binding targets and that doesn't let big polluters off the hook. We really do need to see a massive reduction in the amount of new plastic polymer produced. So my final message, unlike the regular weather forecast, the plastic forecast is one that we can change, and we must change it. And you can go to this website, you can download some information about who to contact, and please get active in the discussion. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. But that was also a lot to take in, right? I don't know how everyone feels in the room, but I feel quite overwhelmed. Plastic pollution is everywhere, right? And our current system is really struggling to cope with it. So how are we even going to cope with it when when plastic pollution is expected to triple by 2060? I'm Garance Boullenger from the MacArthur Foundation, and I will be hosting a great conversation with great guest speakers that we have here today. And I would like to pick it up where Chloé and Tony actually left it, around hope, around what we need to do, what we need to change, and the system that we need to reinvent. And actually, timings are perfect, right? Because part of the solution will happen just in the next few days here in Paris, where senior negotiators from different countries around the world, actually all countries around the world, leading scientists, NGOs will gather here in Paris, just a few blocks away, for the second session of the negotiations of the Global Plastics Treaty, which is a treaty that was, or negotiations that were mandated by the United Nations last year, with the aim to reach an international agreement to end plastic pollution. So there's a lot at stake next week, right? Low ambitions. And what we wish for and what we need actually is for this treaty to allow us to accelerate the implementation of a circular economy for plastics. And before diving into these great discussions with the great guest speakers that we have here today, I would just like to leave us with 3 key principles, guiding principles for these conversations and for the negotiations in the coming weeks. The first one is that the treaty needs to address the full life cycle of plastics. We know that we won't recycle our way out of pollution. We know that recycling is not the only answer. So we need reduction of plastic volumes. We need elimination of problematic plastics and hazardous chemicals. And we need the scale-up of reuse systems to be really front and center of the discussions next week here in Paris. Secondly, we need this ambitious treaty to include global measures that are legally binding. This is our best chance to effectively drive the systems change that we need to see to end plastic pollution. And finally, an ambitious treaty needs to be inclusive and needs to be science-based. So addressing the full life cycle of plastics, including global measures, and inclusive and science-based. That's the 3 key things I would like to leave us with. And now I'd like to turn to the speakers that we have here today. And I would like to start with you, actually, the Minister of Ecological Transition, that I've been told that I can call Christophe. Welcome here today. So the question that I would like to ask you is the following. France, we know, is leading in terms of legislations around plastics. We have different laws here in the countries that allow us to shift from single-use plastic packaging to reuse. And so the question that I would like to ask you is, how will France lead the way next week in these negotiations here in Paris and bring this very ambitious voice to the table?
So thank you, Garance. And if I can start, I would like to salute what Tony and Chloé just did. Because the concept is great and the presentation was very smart and very impressive. And we need to realize how deep is the problem. When you see, if we do nothing, we will triple the production of plastic in the next 40 years. I want to give you an image, very concrete. If we do nothing, if we do not change now, we will have in 2060 more plastic than fish in the oceans of the planet. In fact, in the last 50 years, we have produced and released in nature 7 billion tons of plastic. And we found plastic everywhere. It's very simple. You search, you find. Even at the summit of the Pyrenees Mountains, in a very recent expedition, we have found some plastic. You find plastic in the water, in the natural species, in the food, in the humans. And this negotiation session is really important to change it. Because we are not reducing plastic production. We continue at the worldwide scale to increase the plastic production. For the older French people, perhaps some of us could remember the French advertising for the plastic industries. 40 years ago, it was, "Plastic is fantastic." And if you go back in the past, you realize it seems to be a miracle product. Cheap, very easy to shape in any form, and it was the perfect material to create, to go with a consumption rise. But in fact, it's a nightmare because we find it everywhere. We have some plastic rains. We have some microplastic. Microplastic are the most invasive and dangerous for biodiversity, environment, and for our health. And microplastic come from plastic. A single plastic bag in a supermarket, in classic supermarket, can divide in 10 million microplastic particles. And so you can imagine how complex it is to stop it. So, Saturday, in fact, tomorrow evening, I will have the first session with dozens of ministers coming from all over the world, especially Africa, because people don't know, but Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa are in the leading countries. Rwanda has forbidden the single-use bag in 2008. And it was one of the first countries in the planet to do it. So, tomorrow evening, first ministerial session. During the whole day of Saturday, we'll speak between ministers to define a very high, ambitious, very high ambition, and to define our key point for the negotiation we will effectively start in Monday. France is not perfect. We have a lot to do to be perfect. But we have made something since 3 years, especially with the AGEC law. We are the first country in the world to have forbidden all the single-use plastic in the fast food. So if you go out, it's not an advertising for fast food. You can find some very good French restaurants, but if you go in international channels, you will find in France things you don't find in other countries, because during the only last years, we have used 20 billion of single-use plastic in the French fast food. So with this law, since the 1st January, you have to change that, and you can have a bill if you don't do that as the owner of the restaurant. We have forbidden a lot of single-use plastic, and we have forbidden the right to deliver free plastic bottles in public events. And next year, for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, we want to create a very exemplary event for reduction of plastic. Because to fight against plastic pollution, we need to use all the tools we have. Technology, research, circular use, recycling. But the only way to fight effectively against plastic pollution is to drastically reduce the production. Technology, recycling, everything, it's good, but not so good than the strong reductions of volumes. And so it's why we are very focused on the negotiation we will start Monday. And I want to say the mobilization of public opinions, NGOs, companies, is useful to be strong in the negotiation, because a lot of countries share probably the vision, but not the path. And they want to do it slowly, or step by step, or continuing during decades to use plastic in their economy. And so we need some allies. We have a high ambition coalition with Rwanda and Norway, while leading this 55 countries coalition. But every ally, every people, every association, every foundation is useful, and I want to thank you, really. Santiago and the ChangeNOW Forum, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and the Minderoo Foundation, who are strong partners of this ambition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this answer. That's sheds really useful lights on the negotiation next week. And I think if I put my Ellen MacArthur Foundation hat on, I will say that we count on you. We have a lot of hopes for the negotiations that are coming up next week, and especially we really count on you to bring this voice, bring this very ambitious voice around reduction and reuse. And today, in all the discussions and all the documents that have been submitted previously to these negotiations, we don't see enough countries and enough stakeholders that bring this voice of ambitious reduction and ambitious reuse, reusable packaging, such as what we have here in France in the different fast food restaurants. Thank you.
So basically, at this moment, we are 55 countries saying that. Yeah. But we need to convince 120 other countries who are more silencious. This is the second round of international negotiation. And we need to obtain an ambitious and concrete framework with a treaty next year, normally. We know that in the diplomatic events, solutions are coming at the very end. So when you are just starting the second round of 5 rounds of negotiation, some countries are hiding their intentions, or they're asking counterparts. And it's logical, because we need to create some solidarity between North and South. And most important, we need to take the money from the plastic industries, because they have to pay and to repair the waste they create in the whole world. But 55 on 175, it's not enough. And it's a little bit disappointing when you see the reality of the pollution and the waste. So do some forecasts, do some contests, do some petitions, some forums, some tribunes, everything you can to mobilize the public opinion, because there is a huge difference between the climate change and the plastic pollution. You have some people who don't believe in global warming. It's just terrible, but fake news, etc. But nobody, no one on this planet can say there is no plastic pollution, because it's everywhere, and you can see that with your own eyes. You don't need experts, you don't need reports, you just have to open your eyes and to look all around you. So let's go and change it now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's a great message of hope. And as you're saying, we all have our role to play, right? As a business, as an NGO, as a citizen. So actually, I'd like to turn to you, Tony, and ask you a bit of a similar question. So what are your expectations, your key expectations for the negotiations next week and in the coming months and years, I guess? And how are the different initiatives that Minderoo is leading contributing to that?
Yeah, thank you. So I think a number of the things we've already mentioned, and limiting the production of plastic and virgin polymer at the very beginning of the entire supply chain has to be absolutely critical. That's something that we absolutely have to do. We then have to circularize the economy, so we need to do a lot more with what we've got. And that doesn't apply to plastics, it applies to all kinds of other commodities that we use. And in fact, there are a lot of commodities that we do recycle much better than plastic. And part of the reason for that is most plastic isn't worth anything at the end of its life. It's not designed to be worth anything at the end of its life. And as long as it remains cheaper to produce new plastic than it is to collect and clean and sort and recycle existing plastic, we're going to end up with this imbalance. And one of the things that we're really focused on as a foundation is trying to address this economic imbalance. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment to understand the economics around the application of a levy right at the top of the supply chain. So a levy that would be imposed on the producers of single-use polymers, or any polymers for that matter, it doesn't have to be single-use, that would cascade down through the supply chain to ensure that at the end of its life, the plastic is worth something as a recycled product or as a commodity. So basically, we need to commoditize plastic. In Australia, we have plastic money, right? A piece of plastic is worth $50 because we've decided that it's worth $50, right? But there can be a wrapper next to it that doesn't have $50 stamped on it, and we just say it's nothing. So we know how to make plastic worth something because a lot of countries have plastic money. There are ways to commoditize plastic, and doing the economic modelling, and we have a whole team here from Minderoo who are focused on this work, doing the economic modelling to understand where the pressure points are through the entire value chain, how much of a levy would need to be imposed, how it would be collected, how it would be used, and how it would cascade down through the supply chain to ensure that plastic is worth something at the end of its life is something that we're very focused on. We also need to eliminate the harmful components of plastic. We talk a lot about microparticles and nanoparticles of plastic, the tiny, tiny particles that are in all of us. If you go and get a blood test, guess what? There'll be micro and nanoparticles of plastic in your blood. And the smaller those particles are, the greater the chance that they get into the tissues and they potentially even cross the blood-brain barrier. And the real risk of those particles, whilst the particles themselves are an issue, is the chemicals that are used in the production of plastic are still in those tiny particles and they're leaching into our bodies. And we've done an enormous amount of work on understanding the impact of plastics on human health. As part of my presentation, I showed the cover of a report called the Minderoo Monaco report, which was just released a few months ago in Monaco. I really commend it to you. Please go and download it from our website and have a look at it, because there is a growing body of evidence that a lot of the conditions that we are experiencing as humans and that are growing rapidly throughout the world are likely tied back to chemical pollution, and given the amount of chemicals, plasticizers, fire retardants, colorings, all of these nasty things that are in plastics, and they are in all of us. And one of the quickest ways for them to get into our body is by ingesting and breathing from the rain all of these tiny particles of plastic. We also have to stop it leaking into the environment, so that's the investment in infrastructure that we need. We're also doing a lot of work on looking at alternatives to plastic. There's lots of emerging technologies out there. Which ones are going to be economically viable? Which ones are we going to be able to scale? You know, that's kind of, you know, they're questions that you can't ask at the very early stages of development, but what we can do through our strategic investment fund as impact investors, because as a philanthropy we are impact investors, is to make bets on a portfolio of alternative plastic materials that are coming through the system. And finally, I mentioned the levy, but we have to align public and private capital flows to align with the objectives of a treaty. We need the treaty to be binding. We need it to have teeth. Please, Minister, we must have a treaty that has teeth. And we really do need countries to be able to sign up to it and commit to it and to know what they're committing to and to be able to be held to account, basically. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. That was a very comprehensive answer. I like what you said about the fact that plastics are worth nothing because of the way they're designed, right? And so just shows how much it's just all about choices about how you design the product, how you design the system, and choices that can be changed, right? So that's the hopeful thing. Great. I'd like to turn to you now, Chloé, and ask you this question. How do you go from presenting the weather forecast on national TV to being on stage here today? What have brought you here?
I think it's a quite logical continuation with my ancient job, because when you work every day to decrypt and understand weather, extreme weather, and after that climate change, you know the problem. And you want to continue this decrypt, you want to decrypt all the time this situation, but with 1, 2, or 3 minutes per day with a weather report, that's impossible to create so different things to talk about this subject, because climate change and plastic pollution, it's a different way. You can talk with that with politics, economics. You have the consequences for the biodiversity, for so many different facts, and that's important to create climate magazine and climate report, documentary, to talk about this subject for a long time. So that's why I wanted to change my job, and that's why I'm really honored to be with the Minderoo Foundation, because this kind of things, to use the weather report to describe plastic pollution, it's so important. You didn't know the plastic is in atmosphere, and when you work on the streets, you breathe this plastic pollution. So that's important to understand this fact, and a plastic forecast is the best way to do that.
Thank you so much, Chloé. We're really glad to have you engaged in this great challenge that plastic pollution is, and we hope that you will help us to solve it. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Thank you so much to each of you for coming and attending. Definitely, please, everyone, check the plastic forecast from the Minderoo Foundation. Get involved in the treaty, whether you are a business, a citizen, or an NGO. There is plenty to do. We need everyone on board. We need everyone to talk about it. And we'll see where it goes in a couple of years' time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.